Find another table. This one's for family, not adopted girls. Victoria's voice rang through Belmont's grand dining room, a space of soft music and glimmering chandeliers. My parents laughed, Kenneth smirked, and even Victoria's husband chuckled as if she'd just delivered the line of the night. I stood frozen, clutching my purse, my face burning while other guests turned to watch the spectacle unfold. The light sparkled over crystal glasses and white tablecloths, but I felt nothing but cold. My name is Rachel, I'm 27 and have lived with this family since I was 5. For 22 years, I've been reminded that I didn't belong, that I was charity, not kin. The only person who ever made me feel seen was Grandma Dorothy, my adoptive mother's mother, now seated silently at the far end of the table, her expression unreadable. "Victoria, that's enough," I murmured, trying to sound composed. "Don't be so sensitive," my mother Patricia said with a flick of her manicured hand. "You know your sister's sense of humor." I knew it far too well. At 32, she'd perfected cruelty behind a polite smile. She'd always had the best room, the new clothes, the expensive college, while I got hand-me-downs and night classes. "Sit down, Rachel," my father Gregory ordered. "You're causing a scene." I obeyed, swallowing my protest. Tonight was meant to celebrate Victoria's new real estate deal, another venture financed by my parents. When I'd asked for a small business loan to start my design studio, they'd laughed and told me to be realistic. As the evening dragged on, conversation flowed around me as if I were invisible. Victoria bragged about her new Mercedes, Kenneth about his promotion. My parents glowed with pride. When I mentioned landing a $50,000 contract, my mother interrupted, "That's nice, dear. Kenneth, tell us more about your bonus." By dessert, I'd gone numb. Then the waiter placed the bill in front of me. "What's this?" I asked. Victoria's laugh rang sharp. "Didn't we say? You're paying tonight. Think of it as giving back since you're always taking." "Taking?" I whispered. Patricia counted on her fingers. "The roof, the food, the clothes. We gave you everything. You can at least buy dinner." My hands trembled as I opened the folder. $3,270. They'd ordered the finest wines, lobster, multiple desserts. "I can't afford this," I said. "Of course you can," Victoria purred. "You just said you had that big client." That contract covered 6 months of work and half was already gone on rent and student loans. But I couldn't give them more fuel to call me dramatic. With shaking hands, I handed over my credit card. Victoria was already talking about their upcoming trip to Tuscany. My parents were joining. No one asked if I wanted to come. They never did. When the receipt came back, I signed it with numb fingers. $3,000 for humiliation delivered with a smile. "Well, that was lovely," Patricia said. "Same time next month?" Next month. They wanted this to become a ritual. I opened my mouth to finally refuse when a calm, steady voice cut through the chatter. "Just a moment." Every head turned. At the far end stood Grandma Dorothy, elegant at 78, silver hair gleaming, posture straight as a pillar. The entire restaurant seemed to pause. Dorothy had always been different. While my parents treated me like a burden, she attended my school plays, remembered my birthdays, asked about my dreams. She was also incredibly wealthy, a self-made pharmaceutical magnate, but lately quieter, more observant. "Mother, what is it?" Patricia asked. "Sit down, all of you," Dorothy said. "I have something to say." Victoria rolled her eyes, but obeyed. Kenneth peeked at his phone. My parents exchanged confused looks. Dorothy's gaze lingered on me before sweeping the table. "I've been watching this family for years," she began. "Watching how you treat Rachel." "Mother, please," Patricia protested. "Be quiet," Dorothy snapped. "I'm 78. I've been thinking about my legacy and where my money should go." The table went still. "Traditionally, my estate would go to Patricia and then be divided among you grandchildren. That's what my current will says." Victoria's face brightened with greed. "But I've had a new will drawn up." She pulled an envelope from her purse. Kenneth sputtered, "You're changing your will? Over a joke?" "A joke?" Dorothy's laugh was bitter. "I've watched you humiliate Rachel for decades, and tonight you made her pay for your indulgence." "We were just having fun," Victoria said. "Fun?" Dorothy repeated. "Cruelty is not fun." She walked around the table until she stood beside me, resting a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Rachel is the only one among you who has shown real character. She built her business from nothing, without help. She's kind, disciplined, resilient. Mother, you're being dramatic, Gregory said. Am I? Dorothy asked sharply. Patricia, when was the last time you asked Rachel about her life and actually listened? Kenneth, have you ever congratulated her on her success? Victoria, have you ever treated her like family instead of competition? Silence. You've all failed, Dorothy said. You took in a child who'd lost everything and made her feel smaller for it. She let the silence stretch, other diners pretending not to watch. So, here's what will happen, she continued. My entire estate, every dollar, every property, will go to Rachel. What? Victoria screamed. That's not fair, Patricia pleaded. Mother, that's billions. Rachel isn't even really family. Stop, Dorothy said coldly. She's more family than any of you. I sat frozen, trying to comprehend. Dorothy's entire fortune? Impossible. You're being manipulated, Gregory said. Rachel has done nothing but survive your abuse, Dorothy answered. She dialed her phone. Thomas, file the new will immediately. Faces around the table turned pale. This isn't over, Victoria hissed. We'll contest it. Try, Dorothy said. Everything is legal, and I'm of sound mind. She'd planned everything. Victoria lunged, Kenneth restrained her, Patricia covered her face. You manipulative little witch, Victoria spat at me. Enough, Dorothy said. Rachel didn't know about this until now. I barely breathed. Billions. My mind spun. Why now? I whispered. Dorothy's eyes softened. Because I've watched you suffer long enough, sweetheart. I'm dying. The world tilted. What? Pancreatic cancer? Stage 4, maybe 6 months. She said it calmly, though pain flickered behind her eyes. I found out 3 months ago. I've been preparing. Tears stung my vision. Dorothy, the only one who truly loved me, was leaving. She hugged me. Don't cry. This isn't tragedy. It's justice. The restaurant was silent. Even the kitchen had gone still. You can't mean this, Patricia said desperately. Think about your grandchildren, your legacy. I am thinking about it, Dorothy replied. Legacy should mean compassion, integrity, hard work. Rachel embodies those. The rest of you embody greed. We'll sue, Victoria snapped. Good luck, Dorothy said. I have medical evaluations, psychological assessments, and witness testimony. My lawyer has documented everything. She turned to me. Let's go home. Kenneth blocked our path. She's not one of us. Move, Dorothy said, her voice icy. He stepped aside. We walked through the restaurant under 100 stairs and stepped into the cool Seattle night. Thomas, her longtime driver, opened the car door. Miss Rachel, welcome. He knows everything, Dorothy said. He's been helping me plan this. The car glided away. My family, my former family, left gaping on the sidewalk. Are you really dying? I asked softly. Yes, she said, holding my hand. But I'm not afraid. I've lived well, built something lasting. Now I'll pass it to someone worthy. I don't know how to be rich, I admitted. You'll learn, she said with certainty. You're smart, careful, and you'll have good advisors. I've arranged that. City lights streaked across the windows as we drove toward her estate in Madison Park. What happens now? I asked. Now we prepare you for your new life, she said, squeezing my hand, and we make sure they can never hurt you again. I woke the next morning in a silk-lined guest room overlooking Lake Washington. My phone buzzed with dozens of missed calls, pleading, angry, threatening. I silenced it and went to meet Dorothy in her study. She looked composed behind a vast mahogany desk. Beside her stood Thomas and a sharply dressed man. Rachel, Dorothy said, this is Walter, my attorney. Walter shook my hand. It's a pleasure, Miss Rachel. Your grandmother speaks highly of you. He opened a folder. Let's review the trust, companies, and assets. The numbers blurred. Billions in investments, properties, shares. You'll have access to $5 million immediately, Walter explained. The rest transfers after finalization. $5 million today. My breath caught. There's more, Dorothy said. Your family will contest the will. We need to be prepared. What can they do? I asked. Not much, Walter said. Dorothy's capacity is documented by 3 doctors. The will is airtight, but they can stir public drama. Let them try, Dorothy said. I've collected every cruel thing they've done to you for years. My phone buzzed again. Dad, Dorothy nodded. Answer on speaker. Rachel, please, Gregory's voice pleaded. Your grandmother isn't thinking clearly. She seems perfectly clear, I replied. You can't believe you deserve her fortune. You mean like the $750,000 you took when you adopted me? I said. Silence. I don't know what lies she told you. Bank records don't lie, Dad. You spent it on vacations, cars, schools, for everyone but me. You're ungrateful, he snapped. We gave you a home. You gave me a prison, I said. You made me feel worthless and funded it with my own money. We'll fight this, Patricia said in the background. Please do, Dorothy cut in. Explain it to a judge. The call ended. Walter rested a hand on my shoulder. They have no legal ground. They'll try anyway, I said. They'll lose, Dorothy promised. And when they do, you'll never have to see them again. 3 days later, the story hit the news. Billionaire disinherits family for adopted granddaughter. The press camped outside. Opinions split. Some praised Dorothy, others vilified me. The comments hurt. Dorothy found me scrolling. Close that, she said. People called me worse when I built my first company. You proved them wrong by working, not arguing. By afternoon, Walter arrived. They filed their contest. And Victoria hired a private investigator. They're digging for dirt, Dorothy said calmly. Let them. We'll counter with facts. Soon online rumors spread that I'd failed college, that my business was collapsing, even that I'd caused my parents' deaths at 5. Facts didn't matter to trolls. At 2 a.m, a text lit my phone. You'll regret this. We'll destroy you. V. I screenshotted it for Walter. Dorothy's lessons were sinking in. Morning brought a new disturbance. Kenneth at the gate begging to talk. The family's falling apart, he said. It fell apart long ago, I replied. That's not fair, he said weakly. Fair? I listed everything, the bullying, forgotten birthdays, and the $750,000 theft. I didn't know, he whispered. You never asked. He warned I'd be alone when Dorothy was gone. I already was, I said, and told Thomas to escort him out. Walter rushed in that afternoon. Victoria's lawyers claim you forged contracts. Stall tactic. Dorothy slammed the desk. File to expedite. I want this resolved before it's too late. She looked at me. Tomorrow I'm holding a press conference. We tell the truth, all of it. I'll mess it up, I said. You'll just speak honestly, she answered. The next day, cameras filled Dorothy's downtown boardroom. She appeared frail but fierce. Thank you for coming, she began, methodically presenting documents. Proof of the trust theft, records of abuse, statements from witnesses. Some claim Rachel manipulated me, she said. The truth is, my family manipulated her. Then she gestured to me. Rachel would like to say a few words. I swallowed hard. I never wanted this. I just wanted a family. I learned about the inheritance the same night you did. My grandmother is giving me her fortune because she believes in who I am. I'll honor that by helping others. Cameras flashed. Dorothy squeezed my hand. Suddenly, Victoria burst in, shouting, This is all lies! That adopted brat stole my inheritance. A reporter called out, What about the $750,000 meant for Rachel's care? That was ours! We earned it raising her. The room gasped. Cameras rolled. Victoria realized too late what she'd said. Security escorted her out as reporters typed furiously. By evening, the meltdown had gone viral. Millions of views, endless memes, public opinion flipped overnight. Rachel deserves everything, comments read. Victoria just confessed. Walter smiled. Their case is dead. The DA's office is reviewing fraud charges for your parents, he added. My stomach tightened. They made choices, Dorothy said quietly. Now they face them. A new text from V. I know where you live. This isn't over. Walter filed a restraining order. Victoria spiraled, screaming at neighbors, posting wild rants. Kenneth tried a TV interview painting me as extreme. Reporters shredded his excuses with facts. Gregory cried on camera, calling it a misunderstanding. Patricia hired PR and staged a teary apology. She told a sympathetic journalist, I loved Rachel. Maybe we were strict, but we wanted her strong. The adoption funds paid for her care. She looked straight into the camera. Rachel, if you're watching, please let's talk. Just mother and daughter. I watched with Dorothy and Walter. She's good, Walter said. People might believe her. I don't care anymore, I said. Court day arrived under gray Seattle skies. Crowd swarmed. Dorothy, in her wheelchair, held my hand. Across the aisle sat my family, polished for pity. The judge entered. The family's lawyer argued manipulation. Walter calmly presented the truth. Records, evaluations, statements, and Victoria's viral confession. This is not undue influence, he said. It's justice long delayed. The judge reviewed the evidence, then spoke. The will stands. The contest is dismissed with prejudice. Patricia and Gregory Hayes are ordered to repay the misappropriated trust funds with interest, approximately $2.3 million. Patricia sobbed. Gregory stared blankly. Victoria screamed until escorted out. Dorothy squeezed my hand. It's over. Reporters swarmed us as we exited the courthouse. Questions flew. How did it feel? What would I do with the money? Would I forgive my family? I said nothing. I simply helped Grandma Dorothy into the car while Thomas closed the door behind us. As the city blurred by, Dorothy leaned back, exhausted but peaceful. I can die happy now, she said softly. Don't say that, I whispered. Oh, Rachel, she replied, cupping my cheek with trembling fingers. I've seen justice done. I know my legacy will be used for good. That's all I ever wanted. The following weeks were quiet but heavy. Dorothy's health declined quickly. I stayed by her side, keeping her company through long afternoons scented with lilac tea. I told her my plans, to build a foundation for adopted children who suffered neglect or exploitation, offering legal aid, housing, and education. That's perfect, she murmured. Break the cycle, sweetheart. I'll make you proud, I promised. You already have, she said with a faint smile. On a bright Tuesday morning, sunlight spilling through the curtains, Dorothy took her final breath as I held her hand. Her last words were, "Thank you for being my real family." I sat with her for hours, tears soaking her sheets. She was the only person who had ever loved me without conditions. For the first time in my life, I wasn't someone's charity case. I was her granddaughter. The funeral was intimate, just me, Thomas, Walter, and a few of Dorothy's closest friends. Patricia tried to attend but was stopped by security. In the following weeks, the transfers finalized. I was now the legal heir to a $3 billion fortune. The number didn't feel real. It was a responsibility more than wealth. The first thing I did was found the Dorothy Hayes Foundation for Adopted Children, exactly as I'd promised. The foundation's goal was simple: to help children like me escape abusive families and build new lives. We offered therapy, scholarships, and legal protection. Every success story became a quiet victory for Dorothy. Meanwhile, I hired an expert management team for her companies. I wasn't yet ready to run an empire, but I attended every meeting, studied at night, and learned fast. Slowly, I understood the empire she had built and why she trusted me with it. My family's downfall was swift. Unable to pay restitution, Patricia and Gregory sold their mansion, their cars, everything of value. They moved into a cramped apartment in a rough neighborhood, the same kind of place they once mocked others for living in. Gregory was convicted of fraud for misusing the trust fund and sentenced to 3 years in prison. Patricia received 2. Kenneth, who had benefited from that stolen money, was ordered to pay back $400,000. His marriage collapsed under the pressure, but Victoria's fall was the harshest. Her viral meltdown ruined her reputation. Her husband divorced her, taking their home and assets. A restaurant she had invested in failed, leaving her deep in debt. The private investigator she'd hired to dig up dirt on me sued her for unpaid fees. A tell-all book proposal was rejected for false claims. She tried launching a YouTube channel, but the backlash forced her offline. In desperation, she emailed me a plea for forgiveness, thinly veiled as reconciliation. Rachel, I know we had our differences, but we're still sisters. Family forgives. Things are tough right now. Maybe we could meet for coffee? I deleted it without replying. 6 months after Dorothy's death, I stood inside the foundation's new headquarters, a modern building overlooking Lake Washington, filled with laughter from children we'd already helped. Thomas, now our operations director, smiled at me. Miss Dorothy would be proud. I hope so, I said quietly. My phone buzzed again. Kenneth this time. Mom and Dad are struggling. Can't you help? I typed carefully. I'll donate the $750,000 they stole to a program helping abused adoptees in their names. That's the only legacy they'll have. Then I blocked his number. A year later, I was featured in a business magazine, not as the adopted girl who inherited billions, but as a CEO leading companies in a foundation that had helped over 500 children. The article barely mentioned my family. It focused on my work, my vision, my achievements. People finally saw me as myself, not as someone's charity or scandal. I heard through acquaintances that Victoria was working in telemarketing, Patricia was living in a women's shelter, Gregory was still imprisoned, and Kenneth was bankrupt. I didn't feel joy, only a quiet understanding that consequences had arrived. They'd built their lives on cruelty and entitlement, and when that foundation collapsed, they had nothing left. I built mine on hard work and empathy. Each child our foundation saved, each life turned around. That was my true inheritance from Dorothy. It wasn't the money, it was the chance to transform pain into purpose. Still, some nights I sat by the lake outside the estate, reading Dorothy's old notes. Work hard, be fair, protect the gentle. Her handwriting was steady, each word deliberate. I realized justice wasn't revenge, it was restoration. The best way to honor her wasn't by watching my family crumble, but by building something beautiful in the ashes they left behind. Every story of a rescued child felt like closing a wound. Every scholarship awarded, every courtroom victory, every smile. It all whispered, "You survived, and now you're giving others the chance to survive too." That was the legacy Dorothy wanted. That was the life I was meant to live. I learned how to manage wealth with humility, how to lead with kindness, and how to guard what mattered. I invested Dorothy's fortune carefully, ensuring the foundation could thrive long after me. The media eventually lost interest in the scandal. The adopted girl turned billionaire headline faded, replaced by the woman changing lives. And that was enough. Years later, standing in the foundation's main hall, I watched new generations of children finding safety and hope. Some called me Miss Rachel, others Aunt Rachel. I smiled every time. They reminded me why I'd fought so hard. Justice had come full circle. In the end, my revenge wasn't their ruin, it was my peace. I didn't destroy them, life did that on its own. I simply chose to build. And sometimes that's the most powerful answer to cruelty there is. Months passed, and I began to feel at home in the rhythm Dorothy had left behind. Board meetings replaced courtroom battles, and the sound of children's laughter filled the halls of the foundation. I found purpose in details, numbers balanced, programs expanded, stories rewritten. The woman who once sat at a table of mockery now presided over one of progress. I wasn't someone's mistake anymore. I was their mirror, proof that kindness, once planted, grows stronger than cruelty. Patricia and Gregory's appeal failed. The restitution order held, and their sentences began. Kenneth's settlements drained what remained of his savings, leaving him clinging to part-time work. Victoria's lawsuits collapsed. Each attempt to reinvent herself crumbled faster than the last. I didn't celebrate their failures. I simply watched the pattern end. I'd learned that closure isn't loud. It's the quiet when the storm finally runs out of things to break. I refused every message, every letter asking for reconciliation. I wasn't angry anymore, just finished. Some wounds don't need reopening to prove they've healed. Instead, I kept my energy on what mattered: expansion, sustainability, people. The Dorothy Hayes Foundation grew beyond Seattle, reaching children across states, then across borders. Our first annual gala felt surreal. Survivors of abuse and neglect stood on stage sharing stories of freedom. The crowd cried, clapped, and donated. I announced a permanent endowment to secure the foundation's future. "We build so that no child ever feels like I once did," I said, voice steady. The applause that followed felt like a closing chapter, Dorothy's spirit smiling somewhere above. Thomas, now in his 60s, raised his glass. "Miss Dorothy used to say love is logistics," he told the crowd. Tonight, we proved her right. We laughed and then returned to work because the mission wasn't about applause, it was about endurance. Justice doesn't rest, it evolves. Even years later, journalists still tried to bait me into commenting about my family. My answer never changed. We're focused on children, not drama. Eventually, they stopped asking. The story that once defined me was no longer interesting. What mattered were the classrooms, the homes, and the lives rebuilt from nothing. One day, I visited a college campus where our first scholarship students were graduating. A young woman hugged me tightly and whispered, "You made me believe I wasn't disposable." I told her the truth. You did that yourself. We just opened the door. That was the moment I understood Dorothy completely. Helping people wasn't charity, it was faith in humanity's resilience. Growth brought its challenges. Some partnerships faltered, a few programs needed restructuring, and not every hire fit the mission. But each failure taught me something Dorothy had known all along. The right lessons hurt first, then heal. We owned our mistakes publicly, fixed them quickly, and moved forward stronger. Every quarter, I wrote a letter titled, What We Learned. The first line never changed. Dorothy was right. Character is policy. It became our foundation's motto, engraved in the lobby above the entrance. People stopped by just to take photos with those words. I hoped they understood them as deeply as I did. Years later, I returned to Belmont's, the same restaurant where my life had changed forever. The chandeliers were still shining, but I wasn't the girl trembling under them anymore. I met a donor there for lunch, paid the bill without hesitation, and left a generous tip. Walking out into the sunlight, I felt a lightness that no amount of money could buy. Justice, I realized, isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's a quiet balance sheet of good deeds and gentle victories. It's choosing to build instead of destroy. It's leaving a place better than you found it. And for the first time, I understood that the best revenge is simply peace. I still kept the clutch from that humiliating night, the one I'd held while they laughed. Not as a scar, but as a reminder. I walked away carrying only myself, and that was enough to rebuild everything. The girl who once had nothing now gave everything she had to others. Dorothy's favorite bench overlooked the lake behind the estate. We had a plaque placed there: work hard, be fair, protect the gentle. I'd sit there often, reading letters from children the foundation had helped. Their handwriting was messy, full of hope. I could almost hear Dorothy's laugh in the rustling trees. Sometimes the light hit the water just right, and I'd swear she was still there, telling me to drink my tea and keep going. Her absence wasn't silence, it was guidance woven into everything I did. Every good decision felt like a conversation continued, not a memory fading. If legacy means living stories that make others' lives better, then Dorothy's was secure. Mine was still unfolding. I didn't know where it would lead, but I knew it would keep building. One child, one chance, one tomorrow at a time. The family that once said I didn't belong had become footnotes in a story they'd written themselves. Blood had never defined family. Behavior had. I stopped carrying their names like weights and started wearing Dorothy's lessons like armor. In the end, what they tried to take from me, dignity, safety, love, became what I now gave away freely. That was the true inversion of power. Every child helped was another answer to their cruelty. Every smile was a victory they'd never understand. Years later, the Foundation's audit showed clean books and expanding programs. We were helping thousands. When a journalist asked if I ever forgave them, I said, forgiveness and access are two different things. I can forgive without reopening old wounds. She nodded quietly. Kenneth sent one final letter, an apology mixed with excuses. I archived it, acknowledged, not answered. Patricia began speaking at community meetings about accountability, perhaps trying to rewrite her story. I didn't attend. I didn't need to. Gregory's health failed in prison. I sent an anonymous donation to the prison medical fund, not for him, but for whoever needed it. Mercy, I decided, was something I gave on my terms, not theirs. Victoria tried to rebrand herself online again, claiming redemption, then disappeared when attention faded. Some stories end not in fire, but in quiet collapse, like a house finally empty of echoes. I mentored two young founders who had grown up in the system, bright, relentless souls. I told them what Dorothy once told me: hire people better than you, sleep enough to dream, and never mistake pity for compassion. They laughed and promised to try. At sunset, the Foundation's garden filled with kids chasing bubbles while volunteers packed backpacks for school. That's the image I want the world to remember. Not the scandal, not the courtroom, but the laughter that came after. If someone asks what I inherited, I'll say a mission: to turn pain into purpose, isolation into community, fear into hope. If they ask what I built, I'll say a safe place for the next Rachel who needs to know she belongs. If they ask what I lost, I'll say illusions. They were heavy and I'm lighter without them. If they ask what I gained, I'll say everything that matters and nothing that can be stolen. Someday, someone else will sit at this desk and the work will continue. The mission will outlast my name, exactly as Dorothy intended. Justice, I've learned, doesn't end. it passes on, steady as light across the lake. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is no revenge at all, just living freely, kindly, and well. That's what Grandma Dorothy wanted. That's what she gave me. And maybe that's the truest kind of family, not the one you're born into, but the one you choose by how you live. Years moved on quietly, though not without reminders of how far I'd come. The foundation's influence stretched beyond Washington, new offices in Oregon, California, and even overseas partnerships. Each new project carried Dorothy's name, her principles woven into every mission statement. I refused to let her legacy fade into numbers or statistics. It was about faces, laughter, recovery, the kind of wealth that couldn't be measured by bank accounts. Every week, we received letters from children we'd helped, drawings, thank you notes, stories of adoption and healing. I kept them all in a box labeled Proof of Light. Some days when the world felt heavy, I'd open it and remember why I stayed. Dorothy used to say, people who survive cruelty can either spread it or stop it. I chose to stop it. The media occasionally resurfaced the story, now rewritten as an inspiring tale of resilience. Documentaries, podcasts, and talk shows invited me to speak. I declined most. The point wasn't fame, it was continuity. Still, when I did appear, I always ended the same way. Justice isn't revenge, it's repair. That line became a quiet mantra for thousands who wrote to thank me. Kenneth eventually completed his repayments. A journalist later told me he'd moved out of state, remarried, and started volunteering at a youth center. Maybe that was redemption, maybe survival. Either way, I wished him peace. Patricia finished her sentence, but never spoke publicly again. Gregory's health continued to decline in prison until one day a lawyer called to inform me of his passing. I didn't attend his funeral. I sent a single bouquet of lilies, the same flowers Dorothy always kept in her office, with a note that read, "Rest in honesty." It wasn't forgiveness, but closure. Patricia wrote later, asking if I could help with his burial costs. I didn't respond. My silence was my answer. Victoria's downfall reached rock bottom. After several failed ventures, she moved into a small apartment outside Portland. Reporters caught her once exiting a convenience store in worn clothes, avoiding the camera's flash. For the first time, I didn't feel anger or satisfaction, just distance. The war was over, and I had no interest in revisiting the battlefield. The Dorothy Hayes Foundation expanded into advocacy, pushing for new adoption laws. We worked with legislators, ensuring transparency in trust funds and accountability for adoptive parents. When the bill finally passed, protecting children from financial exploitation, I stood on the Capitol steps holding the signed document. For Dorothy, I whispered to the crowd, though I knew she'd already seen it in spirit. That evening, I sat by the lake behind the estate. The sunset spilled gold over the water, and I imagined Dorothy sitting beside me, smiling at the world we'd built from her kindness. The wind rustled the leaves as if whispering her approval. Sometimes I still talked to her aloud, half expecting an answer. In a way, I always received one, through the calm that followed. My team insisted on renaming the estate Hayes House and opening it as both headquarters and a retreat for foster children. The rooms that once hosted family dinners of tension now echoed with laughter and art. The walls carried drawings, not judgments. Every corner symbolized renewal. The house no longer belonged to pain, it belonged to healing. Once, a girl of about 12 approached me during a summer camp hosted there. She asked, "Miss Rachel, were you really adopted too?" I nodded. "And they were mean?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "But look how it ended." She smiled shyly. "So we can end happy too?" "You can start happy," I said. That was the best answer I could give. The following year, the foundation received a humanitarian award. During my acceptance speech, I said, "I didn't inherit wealth. I inherited responsibility, and I intend to spend it until kindness becomes ordinary." The crowd stood and clapped, but all I could think about was Dorothy, how she'd have laughed, unimpressed by applause, reminding me to get back to work. At times, I revisited my old journals, the ones written in the margins of pain when I still lived under that roof. The words were raw. Maybe I don't belong anywhere. Maybe love isn't for me. I didn't erase them. They reminded me what survival costs and why it matters to pay it forward. Pain, once named, loses its power. As years turned into a decade, the foundation had helped thousands. I stepped back from daily operations to focus on global outreach. The new director, Maya, was once a beneficiary of our first program. Seeing her lead with empathy felt like watching the next chapter of Dorothy's legacy unfold. It's yours now, I told her. Protect it the way she protected me. I still lived at the estate, but it had become more museum than mansion. Open to tours, workshops, conferences. The air felt lighter now, filled with purpose. Every morning, I'd walk the garden path lined with lilies and whisper, "Good morning, Grandma." It became a ritual, part memory, part gratitude. One day, a letter arrived from a law firm. Inside was a deed to a small cottage in the countryside, Dorothy's secret vacation home, left out of all the official documents. Walter, who'd since retired, had arranged for it to be transferred when I turned 40. She wanted you to have somewhere quiet, the note read, for peace, not power. I visited that cottage the next week. It was humble. Stone walls, ivy on the windows, a fireplace that smelled faintly of wood and lilac. On the mantel was a photo of me as a child, sitting on Dorothy's lap. She must have kept it hidden there for decades. I realized she'd been preparing not just for her death, but for my life after it. That night, I lit a fire and sat reading letters from Foundation children. Some had become doctors, artists, parents, all of them carried the same spark, proof that love, once given, multiplies. I wrote one more letter before bed. Dear Grandma, your empire stands, not of money, but of mercy. I placed it beside her photo and felt peace settle like dust in sunlight. In time, people stopped referring to me as the adopted heir. I became simply Rachel Hayes. Not by blood, but by choice. Dorothy's choice, my choice, and every child's choice to belong somewhere kind. My name no longer carried their cruelty. It carried her courage. A journalist once asked, if Dorothy could see you now, what would she say? I smiled. She'd probably tell me to rest more and stop overthinking the accounting reports. But beneath the humor, I knew the truth. She'd be proud but not surprised. She always knew who I could become, even when I didn't. When I turned 50, we celebrated the Foundation's 25th anniversary. Thousands attended. The opening film showed Dorothy's early interviews and our journey since. The screen faded to a quote, "You cannot inherit compassion, you earn it." The audience rose to their feet. I stood quietly at the edge of the stage, tears slipping down my cheeks. Later that night, I visited the bench by the lake one last time. The moon shimmered on the water, and I felt her beside me again, calm and watchful. I whispered, "You were right, Grandma. The best revenge is happiness." The breeze lifted, soft and warm, brushing through the trees as if in agreement. The next morning, I started writing a book, not about scandal or fortune, but about legacy, resilience, and rebuilding. I titled it Inherited Light. It became a bestseller, but more importantly, it became a guide for people healing from family betrayal. Proceeds went entirely to the foundation. Dorothy would have liked that. Years continued to unfold like pages in a story well told. I learned that closure isn't an event, it's maintenance. You keep forgiving, keep choosing peace, keep building. It's not about forgetting the pain, it's about refusing to let it define you. On the Foundation's 30th anniversary, Maya surprised me with a new scholarship in Dorothy's name, the Hayes Resilience Grant. It funded young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. Watching those first recipients stand proudly on stage, I felt the same joy Dorothy must have felt when she changed her will that night long ago. Sometimes people ask if I ever miss them. The family that wasn't, I tell them no, not because I'm bitter, but because I've learned that missing people who hurt you is like watering weeds. You don't owe your past the nourishment of your peace. What I do miss is the girl I used to be, the one who still hoped they'd love her someday. I wish I could hug her, tell her that love was waiting, just not from them, that everything she endured would one day become the reason someone else could be free. Now, every anniversary of Dorothy's passing, we light candles across every branch of the Foundation, hundreds glowing in unison across countries. From above, it must look like a constellation of gratitude. We call it Dorothy's Night. It's our way of saying, love lasts longer than cruelty. Standing there, surrounded by light, I finally understood something profound. Dorothy didn't save me to make me rich. She saved me so I could save others. Money fades, compassion multiplies. And that's the only kind of inheritance worth fighting for. When I look back now, I don't see the restaurant or the courtroom or the headlines. I see a dinner table reborn in every safe home we create, a bar of redemption reflecting through generations. That's how healing works. It echoes. The little girl who once stood trembling before her family had become a woman whose family numbered in thousands, the ones she helped, not the ones who hurt her. That, I realized, was the true transformation. Pain to purpose, wound to weapon of kindness. Every legacy has an afterword, and this is mine. The moment you stop chasing love from the wrong people, the right kind finds you. Dorothy proved it, life confirmed it, and I lived it. If Dorothy's final act was justice, mine was continuation. Her empire of compassion will outlast us both. Somewhere another Rachel is sitting at a table right now, wondering if she belongs. And one day, she'll learn she does, because we built the chair for her. Maybe that's how redemption works. It doesn't erase what happened, it rebuilds what's next. My story didn't end in betrayal, it began there. Pain was just the opening chapter, purpose became the rest. So when people call me lucky, I smile. Luck didn't build this, courage did, compassion did, Dorothy did, and now so do I, every day that I choose to stay kind when cruelty would be easier. And if anyone ever asks what Dorothy truly left me, I'll tell them, not billions, not fame, but belief. Belief that love, once genuine, is stronger than blood, louder than lies, and longer than grief. The lake outside still glows with sunset every evening. I still sit by her bench, still whisper goodnight, and still promise to keep going. Because that's what she'd want, and that's what I'll do. In the end, I realized Dorothy hadn't rewritten her will out of anger. She'd rewritten it out of faith. Faith that I would transform survival into sanctuary, loneliness into legacy. And I did. When I close my eyes, I see her across the dinner table again, not in that night of cruelty, but in another world, one built on laughter, where kindness is served in abundance and everyone has a seat. The story began with a table I wasn't allowed to sit at. It ends with thousands of them, full of people who finally belong. That's the justice Dorothy dreamed of. That's the family she built. And me? I'm just the proof that one act of love can undo a lifetime of cruelty. That one person's belief can rewrite generations. That blood doesn't define you, choice does. Every dawn over Lake Washington reminds me, survival isn't the end. It's the invitation to begin. Dorothy's light didn't fade, it simply passed to me. And I'll keep it burning for every child still waiting to be seen. This isn't the story of an inheritance. It's the story of transformation. Of a girl the world dismissed who became the woman her grandmother believed in all along. And when people ask if I've forgiven them, I answer, yes, but forgiveness doesn't mean return. It means release. I let them go the way Dorothy let go of control, with love, not bitterness. The mansion, now museum and sanctuary, holds a final portrait. Dorothy and me, hand in hand, smiling at the camera. The plaque beneath it reads, "Justice is not punishment. It's restoration." Visitors always pause before it. Some cry, some smile. Every one of them leaves a little quieter, a little kinder. That's how change spreads, through stories that refuse to die. At night, when the halls are empty, I still feel her presence. Not haunting, but guiding. A warmth in the air, a whisper on the stairs. Keep going, sweetheart. And I always do. Because that's the promise I made. To live fully, love widely, and never let cruelty define the end of a story. That's not just her legacy anymore, it's mine. The lake glows silver under the moon. I breathe in the night and exhale gratitude for the pain that shaped me, the love that saved me, and the purpose that sustains me. And as I rise from the bench one last time, I whisper to the wind, "Thank you, Grandma." The leaves rustle softly in reply. Somewhere, I know she's smiling.